mind and see how I saw the world and my family through the lens of the cult's beliefs. My understanding of my experiences shifts with each realization I gain. Thank you for coming with me on this wild and crazy journey to its final destination, freedom. True liberation is in the mind. Faith Jones, March 2021. A not-so-brief history of my family and the children of God. 4 generations of evangelists. My father is a 4th-generation evangelist. His great-grandfather, John Lincoln Brandt of Muskogee, Oklahoma, was a Baptist minister who moved between churches in Denver, Toledo, Valparaiso, and St. Louis. Later, he became a leader in the Campbellite movement, now known as the Disciples of Christ, building and pastoring churches across the United States and around the world. His travels took him to Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the Pacific Islands. He was also the author of over 20 books and a lecturer. His daughter, Virginia, my father's grandmother, was also a famous preacher. She was the nation's first female radio evangelist with her program Meditation Moments, which started in Miami, Florida in the 1930s. She was a prominent evangelist and revivalist who drew crowds of thousands at her evangelistic tabernacle events across America. But her dedication to Jesus came later in life. Although she had been raised a Christian, her faith was shaken with the loss of her mother when she was in her early 20s, and for a time, she declared herself agnostic. It took a miracle to bring her back into the fold. After giving birth to her first child, Yalmar Jr., she fell and broke her back in 2 places, leaving her in terrible pain and often bedridden. Several surgeries failed to correct the problem, and doctors ultimately diagnosed her condition as untreatable. But her husband, Yalmar Berg, an evangelical minister, kept praying over her. My great-grandmother's miracle healing. One afternoon, in pain and at the end of her strength, Virginia called out to God for help. A scripture came to her. Whatever you desire, when you pray, believe you will receive them and you will have them. Mark 11:24. She said, I believe. At that moment, as the story goes, she was miraculously healed and rose from her bed. Yalmar ministered to a small congregation in Northern California, and she shared her testimony there the following morning. Soon, speaking invitations started pouring in, and Virginia's reputation and following began to grow. Preaching about miraculous healing was against her church's doctrine, but Virginia and Yalmar refused to keep quiet and were ultimately expelled from the Disciples of Christ. Subsequently, they joined the Christian and Missionary Alliance, an evangelical Protestant denomination with a heavy emphasis on missionary work. By then, Virginia and Yalmar had added their 2nd and 3rd children to the family, a daughter, also named Virginia, and my grandfather, David, who was born in Oakland, California on February 18, 1919. The family of 5 spent the next several years on the road, holding revivals at churches across the United States. Virginia's story of her miraculous healing always drew crowds, usually between 4,000 to 10,000 strong. Turnout was so great, and her words were so moving, that she was invited to stay as a full-time preacher at a church in Miami, Florida. After 15 years in Miami, Virginia missed her time on the road, and by the late 1930s, she returned to her role as a traveling evangelist. David, my grandfather, was the only one of her 3 children interested in pursuing a life in the ministry, so she took him on the road as her driver and assistant, staging massive events and tent revivals at venues all over the country. Grandpa's Rebellion and Rededication. In 1941, at age 22, David was drafted into the Army. He could have gotten out of it. Ministers and divinity students were exempt from service. But he was tired of being under his mother's thumb and wanted some adventure. In boot camp, he contracted double pneumonia, and, the way he told it, the doctors didn't have much hope he'd live, so he promised God that if he was healed, he'd devote his life to God's service. And just like his mother, David claims he was immediately and miraculously healed, to the amazement of